You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys being here and tuning in. And we want to invite you. We're sending out invitations today. These are special invitations to go to the YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, and you can actually see free for unlimited time the video version of this discussion. I think you'll like it. This gentleman's he's really good looking, I'll tell you that, and he's Scottish, so he's got that great voice. So if any ladies out there, whatever, you want to check him out, you can come see the video on youtube.com/Chris Voss. Go to thecvpn.com. You can go to Goodreads/Chris Voss. Follow all the books I'm reading over there and reviews and all that sort of good stuff. You can also go to facebook.com/The Chris Voss Show and like the page over there. See all the great authors we're doing over there as well. And of course, there's lots of groups for the Chris Voss Show on Facebook as well. You can check that out. Today, we have a most amazing author on the show. We have the most amazing authors every single time. I don't know how we get these folks. They just come out of the Google machine and they bring their books, and we're just like, holy crap, how do we get the best authors? So anyway, this is perfect for our times, especially what we've been going through the last week, because it's crazy. And I think no matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, you can say it's been a weird time. He has written the latest book that just came out October 13th. His name is Gary John Bishop. He's written the book Wise as Fuck. We can say that in the air, fortunately. Simple truths to guide you through the shitstorms of life. And it's part of the Unfuck Yourself series. He's the author of 4 to 5 books and another one coming out. He began his life and journey in Glasgow, Scotland. The grit and wit of his early life has contributed to his irreverent, tough love, in-your-face approach to personal growth. He's the one-time senior program director to one of the world's biggest personal and professional development companies. Gary has created the kind of no-frills message that cuts through the fog of people's lives to transform the real issues that consume and anchor themselves to their self-limiting behaviors and beliefs. Or basically, as he puts it, unfuck yourself. Welcome to the show, Gary. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for that magnificent and generous introduction. I hope I'm not a disappointment after all that good stuff.
I don't think you will be. You like how I took that bio and gave it that end spin? That's pretty.
I liked it. It's probably how I'm going to edit it right down to that. So we're good.
So let me hold up your book here. We've got a chance to read it. This is the book Wise as Fuck. And of course, if you're Googling this, you may have to go FU star K, but I think if you put in Gary John Bishop or what is it? Yeah, it should come up. I think I Googled it and it came up. So Gary, give us the plugs where people can find you on the interwebs, learn more about you, and order the book.
Well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You can catch me at my website, GaryJohnBishop.com. And I'm on YouTube. I mean, everywhere you would find you, I mean, you're probably going to find me hovering around the same channel. And then you can get my books everywhere that you might find good books, I guess. Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Books A Million and all those great places. Of course, audible.com and iTunes if you're interested in the audiobooks.
He's on the interweb, folks. It's a new technology that's come out. There's these tubes that go through the sky, and they deliver really interesting content. So this is a really cool book and probably an appropriate book for our time. Simple truths to guide you through the shitstorms of life. Seems like every day we wake up, especially the last 4 or 5 years, to interesting things going on in our world. What motivated you to want to write this book? You clearly have a series going on, but what motivated you to put this one out?
Yeah, I think it is a kind of messed up time for a lot of people. And you know, it really is a time that I feel as if you need to find something to ground yourself in because there's a lot of noise out there. But But that happens in life. It's not just this time. It could be a very personal thing, like somebody dying or, your business tanks or whatever. So I've always been fascinated by what is it that makes knowledge and wisdom different, and how can you give people knowledge in such a way that it becomes a wisdom. So that was, I guess, the furnace that was fueling the whole thing.
Yeah, I saw you talk about this on your Facebook page on a video, and of course in the book, where you really define, the difference between what we fill our heads with a lot of junk. Like, I mean, especially if you watch the Kardashians, we fill our heads with a lot of junk, a lot of useless crap. And then we have this self-talk, of course, that's always gone in the back of our brain with our ego mind, where we're beating ourselves up all the time. I have one of those demons. So give us an overview of the book, and we'll get into some of the details.
Yeah. So, the book initially really, again, it was that idea of like, how do I get wiser? And do I need to know more stuff to get wiser? And mostly, I think we think of wisdom as experience. So, like, there's something I did, and now I'm wiser for the experience, which isn't really true. There's tons of shit you've done in the past, and you're still doing it, and it doesn't work. So there goes the experience thing. So I really looked at 4 key areas of our lives. One being love, another being loss, another being success, and another being failure. And I really took a dive in, like, okay, so what does it take to be wise in these areas? And if I was wise in these areas, how would it change my life? And that's really what I got into in the book, is like, some principles, some fundamental things that I could hang my hat on, and in certain times of life, I could turn to it, and it provides me with a pathway. And, I really feel as if I'm pretty happy with myself for the job that I did there, because I think it really does provide it for people. I think there is a really sound pathway for you to kind of get grounded in your most testing moments.
And I like how you, you wrote a beautiful book here, but you give it that short, shock sharp, if I can quote Pink Floyd, effect, where you don't rosy it up anyway. I mean, there's sometimes you can read motivational books and you're like, at the end you're just like, so what am I supposed to do now? And you get right to the point of what's important.
Yeah, I think that's part of I'm like the anti self-help guy, like I'm not a fan of the genre at all, which was really why I wrote my first book. And part of my problem with it, there's a lot of just this kind of vague and too strategic, and when questioned doesn't make much sense. And, my books are always short, not because I don't have a lot to say, because I think sometimes you can, it's like gilding the lily, like, how do I get into it with somebody, provide them with some insight, and then let them think. People are smart if you give them a chance. You don't have to lead them all the way down. You can open somebody up to something. And I feel as if that's where people take their biggest ground, is when they're exposed to something and their brain starts popping, and then, they actually start to forge their own pathway.
And that's the challenge a lot of people have. I mean, I have it too, where you try and instigate change. You try and, I'm going to do this. Just before the election, I was fasting, and I started a new fast and a new diet, and started losing weight and feeling good. And then I got into crisis mode with eating my feelings, and decided, well, maybe it's better to wait until the election for me to try and work on some things. But we've all done that, where we're like, hey, I'm gonna change my life. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do new things. And then like 2 years later, like all of it's gone. You can probably fill in New Year's resolutions, failures here. But you get in how to really change these things in your mindset. So Gary, you've built the book on these 4 different principles on the issue and the foundation of wisdom. And you also have a chapter on bad wisdom. So before we get into the 4, let's talk about what wisdom is in your book, and how you've described it, and what bad wisdom is.
Yeah, I think if you spend more than 10 minutes on social media, it's just bad wisdom, right? It's everywhere. But there's a bunch of things in our everyday vernacular, things we say to each other, that seems like, good wisdom, but in fact, it just ends up being really bad advice. And so I take a poke at that in the book, like how there's this notion of wisdom, but it's not really, like one of my pet peeves is the one, everything happens for a reason. Well, that's a really shitty wisdom, right? I mean, that's just really just random reason, right? So no, everything happens for the reason that you give it.
Right? Yeah, that's
so
that's
a
an
little more
interesting
accurate
perspective. I got to write that down and remember that.
Yeah, because there's no universal fucking reason for the thing that's happening, and it's all applying to you. Another one that I love to poke a stick at is the universe has your back. No, it doesn't. The universe doesn't give a fuck for you, right? It's not. I mean, again, that's all that me idea. I mean, try telling the universe has your back to the guy that just got hit by a train, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the universe never saw you there. Like, it has attention on somebody else in that moment. I get it as a context. I understand it as a context, but people use phrases like that to somehow just kind of muddy their way through their lives. And so I separate this notion of what is good wisdom and what is bad wisdom. And for me, good wisdom makes you think. Good wisdom exposes you to something like a certain kind of truth. And if you confront that truth, it'll illuminate a pathway for you. You'll actually see your way through something. Good wisdom cuts through, right? It absolutely cuts through. One of the examples that I use in the book is something that I had said, and I'm arrogant enough to think that I might occasionally be wise, but something I'd said a long time ago, and it was, you have the life you're willing to put up with. Now, if you sit in that statement for a couple of minutes, your life starts talking to you. And then your brain starts activating and it starts going, oh, yeah, hold on. And so then you start seeing things in a different light. And you might see things you need to deal with, or see things you've been tolerating, or stuff you've been putting up with, or stuff you've been pretending, or lying to yourself a bit. Like, to me, that's what good wisdom does. It makes you think. And then when you go beyond that thinking, you start to see that pathway. You start to see a way through certain things. It's not like that pathway will be particularly easy, but it will be a path, and you won't be muddying your way through something. You really will have a method for handling life. Wisdom has got nothing to do with your feelings, by the way. Wisdom lives outside of all of that. You have your feelings, and then the wisdom tells you what to do, and now you got to handle yourself as you do it.
And a lot of people, like we talked about, they subscribe to a lot of stuff that is a lot of BS. Like, we fill our heads with BS, like, stupid stats, Kardashians. I mean, I can spend hours on TikTok watching idiot videos, but there's probably not a lot of wisdom right there, right?
Yeah, it's the kind of idle talk that Heidegger would have called it. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger would have called it idle talk, and it's all like Novocaine for your existence. We don't. I mean, look, it comes down to it. I guess, my thing is based or grounded in existentialism, and the fundamental principle of existentialism is responsibility. Now, I'm not talking about the way that the word responsibility gets thrown around in a political sense. That is not fucking responsibility, by the way. In fact, if people got responsibility the way it truly is, we wouldn't even have fucking politicians, because there's really nothing there that exhibits responsibility in terms of being responsible for who you are and what you put in the world, right? So, but existentialism is like, so if you use something like say sadness, okay? And you say, can you be responsible for your sadness? What do you, where do you even start? Like, can I be responsible for my sadness? Can I be responsible for the degree to which my sadness is impacting the quality of my life and those around me? Oh, well, that's different. That's just like, I'm sad, but can I be responsible for my sadness in a way that I actually have a say in how it plays out in my life? Can I be responsible for being suppressed or down? Like, it doesn't mean, it's not, responsibility isn't about blame or guilt or like pointing the finger. It's got nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with victims and all that stuff. Responsibility is when you start to realize that you have a say. And to me, that's a big part of the message that I want to give people is you have a much bigger say in this than even you believe you do. But we get wrapped up in this idle talk. We get wrapped up in this nonsense because the idea of responsibility seems like a burden, seems like something you'll have to shoulder. Rather, when it's not that, by the way, responsibility, the moment you get that it's your responsibility to be you, the moment you get that there's an integrity to you as a human being that you need to guard and you need to be responsible for, and what you're putting out into the world, like what are you putting out? Is it all defending yourself and justifying yourself and arguing for yourself, or are you bringing something else to the table? And mostly it's something else. Mostly it's all, mostly what we're bringing to the table is our commentary and how everybody else is fucking doing.
You've given me an epiphany to some of the ways I've let anti-chaos sneak in because, I am an atheist and I believe in chaos, and I don't believe that there's some guy up in the sky who's a masochist sadist and has got nothing better to do except torture me and people on the earth all day long. But I have been guilty of saying that, where I've said to myself, well, this must have been, like you said, the way it was supposed to happen, or this is, and I see people too. It's one of those things that makes me mental when I see people in a tragedy where like 9 people are slaughtered at a church by a gunman, and the one person who he lets survive, she says, well, it's God's will, which is like laughing in the face of the other 9 people that were killed. That somehow God's will was to slaughter them and their lives and ruin their families and, et cetera, et cetera. You're just like, what is this entitlement exceptionalism? But I realize that from what you said, that I've been guilty of that as well. And sometimes I use it in the form of karma. I go, well, this is karma, as if there's some sort of order to the chaos in the universe, which is right. The antithesis of what I personally actually believe. And I've just realized that that entitlement seems to be a portion of your book where that's where we really fall into the trap of thinking that we're entitled, that we're exceptional, and that life shouldn't be bad to us, and then we shouldn't experience fear, loss, and have issues with trying to attain success, et cetera, et cetera.
When you get how mind-numbingly ordinary you are, that's quite an extraordinary insight.
Yeah.
It's quite like oh shit, like I'm not special, but that's great. I mean, I think one of the things that I talk about this in the book a little bit. I wanted to jump in, but I'm always conscious of how keeping my books really short and sharp. But we've been involved in this conversational revolution for about 500 years or so. And the revolution is one of freedom. So we're looking for new expressions of freedom, but that evolution is a conversational one. So what do I mean by that? I mean, the freedom is in what we're free to talk about, right? Now, I don't mean in the way that it's painted in American politics, which is just got nothing to do with what I'm talking about. In fact, we're finding new ways to capture life and language. We're able to distinguish things and tell the difference between this thing and that thing and that thing and this thing. And it's been increasing over hundreds of years. Like we can now capture life and language in ways that 300 years ago we couldn't. We couldn't even explain that thing. It was just a thing we'd shrug our shoulders and point to the fucking sky. But now and with a genius of language, we're able to disseminate and distinguish and take apart and see differences between that and that, I mean, I read somewhere, I think 1,000 years ago, there was no word for blue because the color blue didn't exist for us, right? Which is like the weirdest fucking thing ever, but that's how that goes. So there's this revolution in language, and it's all about freedom, 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 freedom for us as human beings. The problem is in that unfolding of that revolution, which is going to keep going because the genie's out of the bottle and it's awesome and it's amazing. And people are finding new expressions of freedom and language. But the problem with it is we're becoming much more singular. We're becoming much more like me, yeah, but what about me? But what about me? But what about we? And where's there's a tremendous value in that, and I don't want to kind of play that down. But you have to keep reminding yourself of the humility of the context, and the context is us, right? And the more, and it can't just be me and those that think like me. It has to be me and those that think like me and those that don't. And that's why, like, I mean, if you look at it from an American perspective, right, which I guess I'm forced to do. But on one side of the political divide, you've got like those that are kind of the progressives and out there on the left. And then you've got those that are way out there on the right too, right? And similar, both ends of the same fucking spectrum. We need those points of view, though. We need those conversations. Why? So that the majority of people, or the kind of growing majority of people towards the middle of it right now, can have a conversation to see what works. But if all we ever do is just locate ourselves out there, we can't have a conversation about works. And those are the most powerful conversations we can have.
Why don't we talk about the 4 different points you touched on? We'll just go through all 4 of them if you want.
Yeah.
Love is probably an important one. People have a lot of issues with that. What do you get into in the book regarding the topic of love?
Well, there's a big I mean, love is such a complex thing for us as human beings at times. There's so much, quite frankly, just nonsense. And that is something that I touch on in the book, is there's a lot of bad wisdom out there, just a lot of bad wisdom. And that section about love, I started to really expose you to the idea that it's all coming from you, that the thing you're looking for is actually coming from you. Even when you find it, by the way, you generate your own experience of love. And one of the big mistakes that we make as human beings is we hold somebody else accountable for that experience. So like, if I want to feel love, you got to give me the goods, which is a treacherous pathway. I mean, it's fraught with all kinds of bullshit. And so one of the things I get you grounded in is to start to confront the degree to which you've done such a thing in your own life, where you've held somebody else accountable for your experience. And it's not like people don't do shitty things. It's not like people don't, like there's infidelity and all kinds of stuff when it comes to this notion of love. But I think if you start to embrace the idea a little more that you're somebody who can generate it in the most crazy situations, and that it's all coming from you, and you notice how you can shift yourself. And when you let go of having somebody else on the hook for that, you're just a lot happier.
Do you have to focus on self-love first? I mean, in loving yourself and just having that core?
I mean, I know a lot of people pursue that, right? I don't talk about self-love. I talk about expressing it.
Fuck that self-love.
Right. Well, it's like a lot of stuff in this genre. I just never rung my bell. I was just always like, well, okay, well, here I am fucking loving myself. Now what? But what I really in love is the idea of like,
sounds like a narcissistic path. Sorry.
It seems like I'm kind of going down there, right? Like it seems like I'm, sending myself a fucking Valentine's Day card or something.
I love me and fuck everyone else.
Right. Like, Scott, I'm awesome, so you're all screwed. But I'm into the idea of like, if you got that you're somebody who can express it and it's available to you, and you do have like a limitless ability to express your love for people, which again, I'll explain in the book, because some people say, well, I'm always, loving people, but I never get it back. And that's the problem. To love is just to love. It's not looking for anything. That's something else that you're trying to handle there. That gets conflated and confused in there and makes it even more complex. But love is very simple, and it's love is never disappointing. Yeah. Right? Love itself is whole and complete as itself. What gets in there is disappointment, of course.
Yeah. I was having a discussion with somebody on Facebook, one of my friends this morning, because they made the comment that if you give in relationships and you try and make the other person happy, it'll work out. And I said, that doesn't always work. I've had relationships where I've had great love and I've given and gotten it back, and everything was fairly fine. And then I've had relationships where it's just a bottomless empty well of the other person. Like, I've actually said to some of the people in some of my relationships, I could crawl onto a cross, nail myself to it, cut open my rib just like Jesus and bleed out in front of you, and you still would be complaining that I just cannot love you or give you enough. Like, there's just no fucking bottom to your well.
Right. I've been there too. I mean, I've been in those situations where, up until about 15 years ago, I lived my life the same way that everybody lives a life, which is this notion of, well, you do your bit, I'll do mine, and somehow we'll work this shit out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this, like massive aha for my moment for myself when I got, you just do whatever the fuck you're gonna do. I'm here to love you. That's it. I don't need, when I told my wife, she was like, oh, thank God. I said, I don't need shit from you, like, just be yourself, I don't, but my promise is I'm going to love you. And I don't always feel like that, by the way. I'm not floating around like Gandhi here, I mean, I don't, it's not always on, I'm not always like, sometimes I'm cranky and I'm like, fuck this shit, like the same as everybody else. But I get to bring myself back to that point where I'm reminding myself, like, I think it's important for us to understand, if you always go by your feelings, you are on the roller coaster, and sometimes you have to kind of step out there beyond your feelings. That doesn't, kind of invalidate how you feel, but I realized, a number of years ago, that if I just continued to go with how I feel, this is not good for me. Like, I am not enjoying this. And, some of my greatest victories in life have been in spite of how I feel, and many people, it's the same. If you look in your life, you've done great things with a shitty mindset.
Yeah. So let's talk about the wisdom of fear.
Yeah. It's always a good one, because if you ask somebody about why they don't do certain things, the first thing we think of is fear. And it's rarely that. It's always something else that manifests itself as fear. Like, it shows up like I'm afraid, but it's actually something else. But I really, one of the things that I think a lot of self-help is about, is grounded in some idea that you're not okay. Like, there's something fucking wrong with you, right? There's nothing wrong with being afraid. It's appropriate. It's like being overwhelmed. Like, you're supposed to be sometimes, You don't have to wrestle with it. It's just there, and it's funny because a lot of the ideas that I'm talking about are, hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Like, this is philosophy. But a lot of modern psychology is now coming around to this notion of, don't wrestle with how you are. Just let it be, and it passes through. And so I say in the book, to fear is to be human, and to deny your fear is to deny your own humanity. And I even encourage people to practice being afraid. It's a limitation when you use it as a limitation. But it gets interesting when you start to question it a little. Then you start to become someone who not only is aware of your own fear, but you're actually developing yourself as someone who can find ways to go beyond it.
That's a great point. We used to have a thing in my company called "Look into the Mouth of the Dragon," and when we made major decisions or made major purchasing decisions and stuff like that, we would look into the mouth of the dragon. We go, okay, what can go wrong? What can happen? What do we fear could happen if we make this decision and it's wrong? And we'd address all the issues, and then we'd make a logical conclusion at the end. Be like, okay, the XYZ risk factor, whatever. But yeah, I think I've been guilty of that in my life, where there's a great irony. You have a fear of having fear and being afraid, and
right.
And as you say, it's the human experience. And
right.
So if we embrace it and look as I like to put it, the dragon in the mouth, then you can deal with it. But if you're constantly running from it, well, you're never dealing with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're wired for fear. Okay, so one of the things that I like to say to people is, look, I could take you, drop you naked in the middle of the forest, and you're actually hardwired to come out the other fucking side.
Yeah, that's Wednesdays around here.
Right. Right. So you're wired for this thing called survival. But included in survival is fear. But we've, in this modern age, in this, as we continue to evolve and develop our intelligence, we're fearful about the most insane shit. Like, we're afraid of a fucking conference call. Like, it's inappropriate, right? It's like,
are you going to get killed on the fight or flight mechanism?
Right, and we do. And so, and I actually think in many ways, and I've seen this so often, like, we apply fear in the absence of true risk.
Mm.
So we'll put it into things where there is no real risk, but we'll just make it seem like there is.
I do have a Jeffrey Toobin fear of Zoom calls, though, now.
Well, I think the less said about that, the better, but I'm not
ruin your career by jerking off on video.
I'm not partaking in that kind of thing. It's just not like, I've realized like that behavior in cell phones or computers is not a good combination.
Yeah, it's not, especially when you're broadcasting the world.
Yeah, it's always the risk.
Yeah, so it's interesting, your approach to fear. I like that. Where people, I think so many times we try and bury that human experience instead of just embracing it and addressing it and going, hey, it's okay, and it just being afraid of fear and then being afraid that you're feeling fear, and it seems to create a snowballing shitstorm of it just makes everything worse, right? Because
it does.
You don't deal with it.
Because the more you're kind of going in, the more internal you get, the worse you'll get. And that's just that, you can take that one to the existential bank. The more internal you go, the more fucked up you'll get. So the more you try and change how you're feeling, the act of trying to change how you feel keeps how you feel in place.
Yeah.
Right. So that old saying, whatever you resist persists. That's true in the domain of human beings.
There you
so
go.
If you resist your fear, you'll constantly be being faced with it. And it's a practice, and I had to say to people, I don't even expect you to be perfect, but I do expect you to practice, like how to have fear and act, right? How to be afraid and step out there anyway. And I've done that more times now than I care to remember in my life. Does it make the fear go away? No, not at all. It's still there.
Yeah.
And so what? I don't want to be lying there in the closing moments of my life saying, well, at least I didn't get too terrified.
Yeah. Or I hope there's not another Zoom call before this is over, right?
Right. There's always that too.
So let's talk about loss. That's the other third tenet in your book. Fear of loss. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So when I talk about loss in the book, the immediate thing that seems to come up for a lot of people is somebody dying. And that is a form of loss, it definitely is. But we're experiencing loss all the time. In fact, if you look at the whole pandemic thing from the beginning, okay, as it started to grow in the conversation in our society, what people are experiencing is loss. And this is the same of all kinds of loss, by the way. Loss can be defined as the kind of pausing, the stopping, or the ending of a future that you had in mind for yourself and your life. So that includes somebody dying, a pandemic, going bankrupt, your husband or your wife leaving, your fucking dog dying. It's the end of a future that you had in mind. It might not be a future that you were fully cognizant of. You might not have it all fleshed out in your mind, but in the back of your mind, life is supposed to unfold a certain way. And so when something like this pandemic comes across our bows, it's like you can't see that future. So people get all messed up. They're trying to make what we have look like what you think you should have. And that's a blunder because you're not available for what's here. You're scrambling to make some sense of this. And you can't make sense of this by using a life where this wasn't here, right? You'll drive yourself nuts. I would call this, a very challenging time for all of us for a slew of different reasons, right? And I hate having this conversation like it's fucking political, because it's not a political thing. I'm Scottish, and I look at how this situation get handled in Scotland. It wasn't handled politically. It was just handled in terms of, the potential of it, right? But it's one of these situations where we're even getting, like, that's a sidebar now. Like, we're arguing about how it should be handled, right? Which is even more of a fuck up. If there's a hole in the boat, who gives a fuck who did it? It's like, let's get the water out, Right. I mean, that's always my approach. I always have that kind of very simplistic approach. So loss for us as human beings is a kind of situation that leaves us very much off kilter. We want this to be like the way that it was in some ways, but at the same time, like, we're not really taking stock of the reality that we're now faced with. And so in the book I actually deal with, like, somebody in your life passing away. As a wife, you start to change how you look at loss, and start to look at it like, well, this thing that's happened, I'm either going to have this thing settle with me in such a way that I'm expanded for it, or I'm going to leave this settled with me in a way that it's kind of gnawing away at me. And that's I think the single most important thing about loss. You have a massive say in where it's located for you. And we don't often have a cognitive sense that we do have a say in that. We're just basically trying to get past it. But again, it's a big part of the human experience. It's the minute I gave up the idea that I'm supposed to be somehow different, I was a lot more at peace with where I was at and able to get to the other side of that. And that's very much the case in terms of loss.
I like how you put that. You made me really think about my identity with loss and my approach to loss, because I went through something kind of extraordinary in my life. I don't know how extraordinary it was, but I went through like 27 years where no one close to me had died. Like, no one. Like, I just went, and I honestly, in the back of my mind, felt a little immortal. And I had my 2 dogs, which were my children, and I knew their life expectancy was 10 to 12, 14 years. They had gotten to about 15, 16, or maybe it was 14 to 15. And, but I just, no one had died around me. I had no calluses to this effect of loss. And suddenly one of my dogs had a seizure and died. And it was just really short, sharp. I had known that she had seizures for a while, and we knew that time would come. But just given my experience, I had no way to deal with it, and no calluses really built up to deal with it, and so it was really hard. And I think a lot of people that experience loss, sometimes it becomes their identity because they get wallowed in it; they can't get out of it. I think I went through a few years of that, and maybe I still struggle with it sometimes. But it's hard when, what you made me kind of realize, a little epiphany I've had is, hey, we need to really realize that loss is going to happen in life. Chaos is going to happen. Shit's going to happen. We're going to lose people, and there's going to be sadness. There's going to be loss. And the fact that I was, in such denial of it for so many years, like, I'm immortal, like, we're never going to fucking die. And I even thought my dogs would, like, probably live after me. So yeah, it's kind of interesting approach to loss, and just kind of realizing that, hey, it's going to happen, and you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm always fascinated by, like our own humanity, like, and we do get wrapped up in things like we cannot ignore the actual chaos that's going on around us, and we pretend that we live in this little bubble of certainty. And so it's never certain. And I talked about this at length actually in my first book. Like, there is no certainty. It doesn't exist. It's a human phenomenon, right? Like, bears get, this is fucked up. I got to make my way here. Like, human beings are like, no, I got my home, I got my car. Like, and you live with the illusion that somehow all of that is concrete. And it's not. We live in a chaotic universe. We could get hit by a fucking asteroid tonight. It's all over. But that illusion of certainty is what we're trying to build. It's somewhere along the line of, in our own evolution, the kind of craziness of living in the wilderness. Like, we're building huts, and now we're building a fort, and now we're building a town, and now we're building a city, all to create this illusion of certainty. And the funny thing is, though, human beings are brilliant with uncertainty. Like, they're freaking awesome with it. When they expose themselves to, when they let themselves get, oh yeah, this is all kind of fucking nutty here, they're brilliant at navigating it.
Yeah, but tragedy sometimes brings out our best traits.
Oh my gosh. But then what we tend to do, though, is we're trying to keep it so certain. That's where all our attention goes. Like, how to keep this little bubble safe and secure, without realizing the thing that built that bubble was your ability to dance in the uncertainty, was to dance with loss and fear and those supposed threats. You realize when you're a bigger human being than you give yourself credit for at times.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point that I just realized. I mean, we're really great human beings in the recovery of a tragedy. We're great to each other. We're helpful to each other. We really, just like all the shit that we're normally tuned into gets turned off, and we always seem to be at our best when you really think about it after tragedies and recovery. But it's when we're in the normalcy of day-to-day life that we're just horrible human beings to each other.
Our world is built in survival. Okay, so I mean, this is probably a little too philosophical, but I'll do it anyway. So we live in a Western capitalist society, and most Western societies are based in some version of that, right? So that includes this kind of level of competition and getting there and looking out into the future. And so we're all working on getting there, paying off our credit cards, paying off a car, going on that vacation, buying those shoes. All of those things are kind of getting built in. When the kids grow up, it'll be better. When I get kids, it'll be better. When I meet somebody, it'll be better. Everything is some phenomenon of later. When I finally lose that 5, 10, 12 pounds, when I finally stop, or when I start, la, 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 la. So our lives are always kind of geared towards someday in the future when this turns out. And that's all survival for a human being. It's all survival. And then occasionally you get these times when it's like, bang. And that little matrix gets punctured. So like you said, maybe somebody dies. And then when you take away all the survival for a human being, like if you just take all that away, human beings want to contribute. They want to support each other. We are wired for that too, but the survival will always win it. So we do like helping out. We do like supporting each other. We do like, stepping in when somebody's down. We do like it. And we feel better about ourselves when we do it. Why do we feel better about ourselves when we do it? Because it's not about us. It's about somebody else. And that's when human beings are absolutely at their best.
Yeah. But I mean, if you really look at us through the arc of history, we're the greatest in tragedy.
For sure. I mean, but it's amazing how, like, my life changed the minute I got that it's not about me. But I'd spent 40 years making it about me. It was a tough addiction, But when I realized, like, I was a better man when my life was about you. I experienced myself as a better man when my life was about you. And I experienced myself as a better husband, and a better father, and a better friend. And it was amazing. It wasn't like I'm doing this so that I feel better about me. It was like, that's just how this worked out. Like, I noticed the more I made my life about you, well, shit, I mean, most of my stuff pales into insignificance when I write my books for people who are struggling. I used to have a coaching business, and I just didn't want to coach people anymore because they were all doing pretty good, and we were talking about bullshit most of the time. And I truly want to make a difference for those that feel like they're struggling or suffering. And I noticed that when I do that, and I think it's the same for all of us, when we're in the zone like that, all is pretty much well in our world.
Yeah. Fourth tenet you have put in the book is the wisdom of success. And all these tenets are built on wisdom. I think I quoted the fear one wrong. And we'll get to wisdom here in a second, talk about that, the basis of that foundation. But let's talk about the wisdom of success, if you would.
Yeah. It's funny because it ties in a little bit to what I said. And in our society, we've bought into the notion that success is something that you're striving for. And in my view, that's why we have a lot of desperation in our society. So success is later. And if you think about success in that power or on that spectrum, so I've got you've only got two outcomes. I'm either doing it or I'm not doing it. And then what's it like? And this kind of commonly accepted notion of wisdom. What's it like for me is if I'm not doing it? Well, mostly you're getting your face rubbed in it by the world of doing it, right? I mean, and so it's success and desperation, the way that we currently view success. And I don't deal with success that way. And this is what I was giving people in this book. Success is a place you come from. It actually, when you come from success, you can actually see what's working about your actions and what's not working about your actions. You're never desperate because you're always coming from success. It's always it's how you approach everything that you're up to in life. So success, I flipped the whole thing. Success isn't somewhere to get to. It really is a place that you're coming from. And it's not always measured in your bank balance or your followers, right? Thankfully not your followers, because there's fucking cats on Instagram that have got more followers than me, right? So there are. I mean, there's pages of
feeling.
Yeah, there's people have got pages about their fucking socks that have got more followers than me. I'm like, what are we doing? So thankfully, I gave up that ghost a long time ago. But I really do look at it like success for me is every day, like the privilege of getting up and getting to be who I say I am. I'm always coming from that spot. The book sales are nice and the bank balance is nice and it's all nice, but it's not how I measure success. And that took a lot of pressure off. And in fact, by the way, when I took that pressure off, those things I actually became more successful with. When I took the pressure off that I needed to get there, I realized that it was all where I was coming from. And so I love to debunk the notion of success as we've come to accept it.
Yeah, I've had some friends. It took me a while to get to that conclusion too. I had some friends that are like, I'd be like, what does success mean to you? I wake up every day. I get up. I'm still here. I have my health. I'm successful because I'm still, life is like we talked about, a giant shit show of a game of survival of the fittest. And I remember complaining, I think on my 50th birthday about how I turned 50 or something. And I was whining about it on Facebook, being a little bitch. And somebody said, hey man, you should really be happy, Chris, because there's a lot of people who didn't make it to 50. There's a lot of people not here right now that wanted to be here. And maybe you should put it in perspective there, buddy. And I took that.
It's the same. It's the same across the freaking board. It's so. Look. There's always somebody in a worse spot than you, right? And I'm not saying that, by the way, to stay positive or keep your fucking chin up or something, which is all bullshit. I hate positivity. But at the same time, there are moments in your life when you got to reach for some perspective. And why? Because you're dwelling in something. You're sitting in something that really isn't a useful expenditure of your time in this planet. I'm kind of like the Alan Watts school of philosophy on this one. The purpose of your life is to be alive. There's nothing. It's not, you don't have to be, rescuing fucking koala bears or something, right? Or whatever one might think is the purpose of your life. The purpose of your life is to be alive. What you do with that is up to you. But, if you confront somebody and say, oh yeah, like that thing you're currently doing right now, that's what you're doing with your purpose. Then that's a little bit of a wake-up call. Not everybody's going to be a gazillionaire. Not everybody's going to be, fucking Tony Robbins or something. Not everybody's going to be, a famous soccer player or something, which is actually called football. I was just being polite there. But not everybody's going to do those things. But that doesn't mean to say you can't live a life absolutely chock full and filled with a purposeful expression of who the hell you are.
There you go. I think that's a beautiful statement right there. I mean, so many people, like you say, they wait to live their life. Well, I'll be happy when I make $3 million a year. I'll be happy when when someone loves me back, right? I mean, I was guilty of this one time when I was young, but the concept of you got to find the one and marry them, and until you find the one person, your soulmate, you'll never be complete. So people just walk around with these broken glass beings.
How fucking arrogant is that? Like, there's 8 billion people, but there's only fucking one for you. You know what I mean? Like, well, that's the height of arrogance. There's fucking tons. There's probably at least a couple of million.
There's a million fish in the sea. I mean, I used to hate it when people used to tell me that, and I'd be like, "Oh fuck, just anyone? Like, give me the perceptions. Like anyone will do, really." But that's not true. It's just there's a lot of combinations of stuff. But we walk around with these broken things. I think one thing that is hard for people when they deal, and I'm jumping back to loss or tragedy and stuff, is a lot of people. They have different things that float them through life. Me, I'm an atheist, but I see a lot of people that struggle with this, that believe in a God or religion. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but one of the problems they have is they're confronted, because that's their security blanket now in the chaos of life. They're confronted like, why did God do this? This is God's will, according to my beliefs. And why is he being a jerk to me and my friends and everybody in life?
Yeah.
They have to
I got a simple answer to that, actually. And it's, so for people who are people of faith, if your faith is not empowering you, if the context of your faith isn't empowering you, then you're looking at it from the wrong perspective, right? So you're kind of coming at it from a singular way. And I wouldn't call myself a person of faith. I would loosely term it, like spiritually Scottish. I guess I might say I'm a little bit more there, but it's all contextual. It has to be a context that empowers you, and I assert that that's what most faiths are designed to do. They're designed to empower you as a human being. So if it's not empowering you, you got to shift gears, and that doesn't mean change your faith. It means dive in a little deeper, find a way that you get nurtured and empowered by it, rather than dwelling in something that's sucking the life out of you.
Definitely. And I think you bring up a good point, because this falls in everything you've been talking about. Instead of looking for something else to fulfill you or make you happy, or fill that bucket that you have, make yourself happy. And so if you're constantly, if you're a religion, you're looking for a God or a deity or a demigod in politics or whatever you're looking for in life to make you happy, therein lies the problem of why that bucket never fills. Is because you need to fill it yourself.
Your search for happiness, if you think about that, right, the phenomenon, right, the pursuit of happiness, for instance, by the way, which is a nice idea, but it's a shitty place to start. Because if I'm engaged in the pursuit of happiness, I'm admitting that I'm not.
Mm-hmm. I've had that in my relationships too, like where I've had, it's like trying to find the combination to safe with 50 different combinations. And you're just like, they're like, you just don't make me happy. And I'm like, what do I have to do to make you happy? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, if you don't know, how am I going to know? Because I don't know how to make you. I
mean, I'm married to a ridiculously brilliant woman. But we both said, like, it's not my job to make you happy.
Does she have a sister? No,
well, it's not my fucking job. And I've got 3 boys. I got 3 sons. The oldest is 15. The youngest is 6. Mm. And they'll be like, I'm bored. And I'm all right, well, there you go. It's not my job to unbore you, right? Yeah. It's not my job to bring joy to your life. Now, luckily, you have the kind of father and the kind of mom who loves, like, inspiring and being around their kids, and, like, adore it. But at the same time, when they're in that space, I'm like, well, you're the only one that can get you out of there. So what are you going to do now? And it's not, and I see that as probably one of the biggest things that I've ever given my children in terms of wisdom is, like the George Bernard Shaw quote, the world will not devote itself to making you happy.
What?
It's fucking shocking.
When did this start? I didn't get this memo.
I know, it's crazy.
The world doesn't revolve around me.
I know, it's absurd. It's absurd.
I think there's somebody in this world we need to send that message to, or maybe they've got the message, they're just not getting it yet. Anything more we need to know about the book, Gary, as we go out?
No, I'm just pretty delighted to have this conversation with you. It was very interesting. You asked some great questions, and it's definitely like your perspective on this book is definitely keyed into one that I'd want people to have. That is challenging yourself to think and be challenged by what I'm saying there, and allow yourself to have new thoughts.
Well, you give me several epiphanies during the show. If you're listening at this point and you haven't listened to the whole show, some reason you jumped in the middle, watch the whole show. I've had several epiphanies. So I guess, Gary, I can say that you are wise as fuck.
I'll take it.
Tie that right in there.
That good.
There you go, guys. Check out the book, Wise as Fuck. Simple truths to guide you through the shit storms of life, which sometimes we feel we're going through every day. But according to Gary, maybe we should get some perspective on that. He's the author of the New York Times bestseller, Go Unfuck Yourself, or I should just say, correct that, Unfuck Yourself. Gary, where can we find you on the interwebs? I'm
at my website, garyjohnbishop.com, but I'm very active on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And, I love giving people little nuggets every other day or so, just to kind of keep them thinking and keep them on their toes.
There you go, guys. We live in may you live in interesting times, I think is the saying. Bobby Kennedy repeated it from, I think, a Greek philosopher or something like that. And we certainly do, but how our perspective makes a difference. Great book to take and get a hold of, and his other books as well. Go to amzn.to. You can also go to our shop on Amazon. I think it's amazon.com/shop/Chris Voss. Order up the book, go to his website, check Gary out some more. To my audience, thank you for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification button. Watch all the great videos we have there of all the great authors. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. You can see everything I'm reading, reviews, all that good stuff. Go to the facebook.com/the Chris Voss Show. You can see the page there, like it, and all that good stuff. And of course, you can find a bunch of groups on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Thanks, my audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.